Our Becoming Brigitte series barely scratched the surface. We left so much on the table because we didn't want to overwhelm viewers. It's just so sick and sadistic, and it's such a web. And I come back to this idea that the elites, who we should probably be just referring to as the depraved, are bored. I think they are bored with their power. Going back to that book, for those of you guys that are getting into our Epstein series, going back to that book that Donald Barr wrote, that fantasy book that was too much like real life, predicting the rise of Jeffrey Epstein, who he helped to rise. And yeah, going back to that book where he theorizes that these people, this colony, they're so corrupt, but they're bored with their power because they control everything. And you think about that in terms of our depraved elites, and the only thing that likely really excites them is the idea that they might get caught, right? They got to just get more and more extreme. They kind of have to flaunt it in our faces as if they're daring us to say anything, right? What are you going to do? The Olympics, like that? Yeah, we're doing this right in your face. What are you going to do? What can you do? We rule over you. And that's kind of the idea of installing Brigitte over France in general, because you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to install Brigitte over France with Emmanuel Macron. So many examples of that as I get into all of these stories. I can give you right now 2 more examples of that sort of public audacity, right? So one is just Tiffany. This is like a fun fact about Tiffany, if you will, if it was an American name. And remember, this is allegedly Brigitte's daughter. I'm showing you this family tree in case you're someone who's jumped onto this late. I know a lot of people are catching up to the series in Asia at the moment. But yeah, this is allegedly the real family tree. Brigitte Trogneau marries Andre Louis Ozier, and they have 3 children. People, they have 3 kids. They have 3 kids, right? And of the 3 children, Tiffany is the one that always speaks out and defends her quote-unquote mother. Now, would have been very easy, obviously, would have been for Brigitte to, at some point, just produce photos of her raising those 3 children. No, she can't do that, obviously. So instead, she just sues everyone who suggests that she didn't give birth or raise those 3 children. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Point is, regarding Tiffany, last year, she published a book, okay? And it's important to state that for a living, what Tiffany does is she is a lawyer. Now, do lawyers author books? Yes, sometimes. Those books tend to be nonfiction, right, in the category of nonfiction. But Tiffany last year decided to publish a book, I think for the very first time ever, and it's a fiction book, which she says was loosely inspired by real cases that she came across as a lawyer in the north of France. And this particular fiction book covers themes related to domestic violence and, all right, you guessed it, incest. Yeah. Of course, duh. Come on, you guys. The book is entitled Assises, and that I think that's a French word that also is a term that they use to describe their courts. And it's billed as a novel which explores the complex themes related to violence and trauma, particularly focusing on situations where the boundaries between the victim and the perpetrator are blurred. According to available descriptions, the book features characters such as Jeanne, who's a victim of incest, and Laura, who's accused of killing her partner, who's also her abuser. I mean, why not, right? Why not just add a fiction book to the mix for funsies? And it's, I guess, an irresistible theme everywhere in France when it comes to incest. It's like, okay, I'm a lawyer. I want to involve myself in cases related to incest. Okay, I'm a lawyer, Tiffany, and she's like, I want to write a book, a fictional book, covering that same theme, among other violent themes. What are we to make of that? I don't know. Let's move on, okay? I also wanted to unpack, because obviously now I'm looking into the cases that Brigitte brought more closely, as much as you can, as an English speaker. France, in general, likes to keep things very private. Like, this is kind of their culture. Oh, you have no right to even ask questions. We're so polite. You shouldn't even ask questions pertaining to Brigitte's background. And something that Xavier Poussard pointed out to me is it's very interesting that the first case that Brigitte brought about against the journalist was for invasion of privacy. Like, that was the crime. Not saying that I was born a man, but the fact that you invaded my privacy. It really signals to you that they think that's enough, telling the public that you should ask no more questions because, I even though I'm a public person that has a lot of power over and I can rule over you, I deserve some privacy. So anyways, looking through the recent appellate court case for defamation that Brigitte brought against and lost against Natasha Ray and Amandine Roy. And it was, of course, the natural expectation to the outside world that in order to sort of disprove this notion that Brigitte Macron at first lived as a man named Jean-Michel Trogneau and then became Brigitte, that Brigitte would just very easily show up to this case with her brother. Like, I'm going to show up with Jean-Michel Trogneau. This is my brother. We're here together. Please stop this nonsense, right? Common sense is that you allege that your brother is living, that he is breathing, and therefore the best defense would just be to bring him with you to prove that you are in fact two different people, okay? But at no point has Brigitte been willing to do that. At no point has Brigitte been willing to simply appear with her brother to shut down these rumors that she is him. So you go to the next obvious thing would be that Brigitte is going to shut down these rumors that aren't true by producing for the court pictures of you and your brother together growing up, maybe. Okay, he's not going to show up. He's a very private guy. He enjoys his privacy, but here are, like, you know, millions of photos of me and him growing up together, playing in the yard, right? That's my brother. I love him so much. And you can see, because there's so many photos, that we have existed throughout our lives as separate people. But no, Brigitte was unwilling or unable to do that either. So what did she present to the courts, the appellate courts, as definitive proof that she's not her brother? Well, she presented a voting card, okay? A voting card, which we have a photo of. I'm not kidding. The First Lady of France presented as proof that she is not Jean-Michel Trogneau, and Jean-Michel Trogneau is instead alive and apparently living an entirely different life separate from her. An electoral card, which, by the way, of course, as you know, it's the same in America. Does not have a photo attached to it. It is also not considered an official, by any means, a stretch of imagination, is this an official form of identification. But she presented this as proof that they're totally different people because Jean-Michel Trogneau, as you can see by this photo ID card, he voted on June 9th in Amiens one year. And in that same year, Brigitte Macron voted in Le Touquet, like, you know, a separate town. So we're obviously not the same person, as you see, because the voting ID card is proof. You can tell by the stamps that we voted in two different locations. Aha! Trust me, bro, she's not a bro. Aha! They got us. And okay, that doesn't really feel like you got us at all. And so then the court pushed more on this, and like, maybe your lawyer should present an actual ID, a pictorial ID that is recognized as a legitimate form of ID. And they did. They produced an identification with a photo of Jean-Michel Trogneau, which I can tell you guys, it's the same Jean-Michel Trogneau. Remember, they sent us a screenshot of a video from the inauguration, and they said, this guy in the background is Jean-Michel Trogneau. This is it. This is what they sent us, like my legal team, as proof that he's totally alive. And so what they presented in court was this guy, a photo ID of this guy saying that he's Jean-Michel Trogneau. And curiously, that ID, though you could say is illegitimate because it was expired. It's an expired ID. It had been expired for 3 years, okay? And here's the most interesting part. This is what really has gotten people speaking about this. The photo ID expired specifically in April of 2022. And it's interesting because then they also presented a photo ID of Brigitte Macron. This is it. And coincidentally, Brigitte Macron's ID had been issued in April of 2022. So Jean-Michel Trogneau's ID expires in April 2022, and Brigitte Macron's ID is issued in April of 2022. Could be a coincidence. I don't know. We're definitely going to find out because we have a court case. But the broader point here is, where's your brother? Just bring him with you. Why doesn't this person want to sit under oath and say that he is your brother and that he's that person, the original Jean-Michel Trogneau, that's curiously missing, and that his face doesn't match when it's run against Chinese software and technology that we're not getting a match here. We're getting a match that's you, that you're this little boy in the photo. Why doesn't he want to just show up and put all of this to rest? Nobody knows, guys. Nobody knows.